Hey poker players, Timothy Adams here. I'm going to run you through 5 important tips for the deep stack early stages of a tournament where you're sitting on, say, 200 big blinds. Let's get into it so you're ready for your next tournament. Tip 1 is to show up, build now, and benefit later. Gaining chips in early levels is always going to be valuable, but in the current climate of tournament poker, I do think it's even more valuable than years prior, so let me expand. With the accessibility of early ICM adjusted ranges, with the caveat that a lot of these outputs are built from a model with a lot of limitations, we are seeing players tighten very, very far from the min cache. Early ICM adjusted ranges are generally going to overestimate a short stack's value, put high priority on mid stack survival, and in turn is going to over reward big stack aggression. Since many players follow these solutions with a very hardline approach, it's a current trend that players are just letting big stacks get away with wild opens, aggressive three bets, when pressure, in my opinion, is mostly over exaggerated. So, as we're kind of still quite a ways away from the min cache. So, that's why I'm trying to say building a stack in the early levels, setting yourself up for very high EV situations is going to be really, really valuable. Another big upside is a lot of MTT regs who are generally just very sharp players, they like skipping the early levels because they've put a lot of work into just shallow stack stuff or ICM stuff. So I can't tell you how many times I've just shown up on hand one and it's me, 4 or 5 players. They're all casual players. That's really good for my win rate. That's giving me a better chance to accumulate now and benefit later. But now that you're fired up to go get a stack, here's the catch, and it's tip number 2. When you're this deep, say on 200 blinds, value thresholds are going to dramatically tighten to play big pot, and that's going to be true for preflop and for postflop. Many times on medium depths, having the perceived nuts will be enough to play for stacks, but when we are this deep, having the actual nuts is going to go way up in value. So at this depth, it's a bit of a balancing act. Since thresholds narrow significantly, we are often trying to just contain the pot size. We're just a little more defensive because now our great hands on like medium depths only become good hands on deeper depths. So with a very deep stack to pot ratio, pots can just balloon very, very quickly. Our equity can easily be denied, and we just often prefer taking a bit of a defensive stance. For the past year, I've been working on a new course called Modern Tournament Mastery with my good friend Daniel Lavoris. Daniel and I take you through each tournament stage comprehensively, with myself mostly focusing on the early to the mid stages, while Daniel takes over as we creep up to that bubble and onwards. In my opinion, he's the best of the best when it comes to just understanding how ICM shapes our responses, and you're going to be in expert hands. We're also going to be joined by the legendary Stephen Chidwick. He's going to join as a featured coach to specifically help analyze the Triton London 2023 main event. We do many hours of analysis in a tournament we both happen to final table, and you're going to get a front row seat to just see how we break it down. So you can pre-register at the link below. Tip number 3 is to build your raise for sins for big pots. A fundamental way to think about preflop this deep is we want to make sure our raise for sins are centered around combos that can generally win big pots. So for example, on 200 blinds from the U7 spot, you'd rather raise for sin with King 8 suited than King Jack offsuit. Something like King 8 suited has real nut potential, while something like King Jack off, it can make the nuts, but it's more built for just making middling strength top pairs, which is great at medium depths, but a lot less valuable with so many pots to play. So we're really looking for nut potential. But you may be like, well, a hand like 8-5 suited can also win a big pot. It's suited, it's connected. I'm going to open it from the U8 or the U7 spot, which brings me to my next tip, which is factor in reverse implied odds. When we are this deep, making the actual nuts goes way up in value. You have to be at least concerned about making the second best hand. So something like 8-5 suited can easily be flushed over flushed, get straight over straight versus say 10-8, which calls a lot as the IP player. So if you raise first in from U7, 10-8 is going to call you in multiple positions behind. On a board like 9-7-6, where you both make a straight, you make the worst end of it, well, you're going to get probably stacked. So these are the type of things that you should at least be considering when building your raise for sins. Let's touch on post flop. So we have the idea that we're often maintaining the pot size. On many textures, our average bet size is actually tailoring down. We may actually be checking back quite a bit of boards that are pure bet on shallower depths, but by being deep, there is a lot of room for turning up the volume, putting in more volume, and building a pot. So I mostly want to talk about turnover bets. So tip number 5 is barreling your value for the right amount. Say we're at the start of the tournament, we have 200 blinds in front of us, we're on the cutoff with ace-jack offsuit, we raise first in, say the big blind defends, we get a board of jack of clubs, 7 of clubs, 5 of hearts. Good board, if we were on 50 blinds with a stack to pot ratio of 8, we would be really, really pumped to just bet big, deny equity, start playing for stacks. But on 200 blinds with a stack to pot ratio of roughly 30, it wouldn't be crazy to check this back at some small frequency, since getting check raised and then having to play future streets can get pretty uncomfortable. So we're just adding a few more of these like good but not great hands in a check back line, which can also just be useful for how we build our responses on later streets versus aggression. But let's say we do bet like we should the vast majority of the time and we choose 3/4 pot, so B75, and say we get called. Say the turn is a very bricky, innocuous offsuit. Two, we face a check, and this is a spot where our hand, ace jack, has quite a lot of equity, 80% plus. We want to be very polar when we bet. A mechanic to consider when we're this deep is our river value betting thresholds are going to tighten because often we don't want to reopen the action with such a deep stack to pot ratio. So to mitigate this, we oftentimes want to put the appropriate amount in on the turn. We want to front load with an overbet. Too many times I see casual players picking more of a middling size here, so say like 2/3, so B66, just hoping to get 3 streets of value. But 3 streets isn't always going to be on the table this deep. So in this particular spot that we're looking at, there just aren't that many rivers you want to reopen the action on. There's maybe an offsuit ace X, jack X, but just not that many. So by putting in the proper turn volume like B150 or B200, so 200% pot, you're achieving what a lot of your value wants to achieve right now. And of course, you're going to have a lot of equity driven semi bluffs to kind of complement this value, which also benefits with big sizes. Hands like flush draws don't have to worry as much about bet folding away a bunch of equity because when we're this deep, you rarely get raised or jammed on like you would in shallower depths. So the overbet is going to be very effective. But with such a deep SPR, there is a lot of room for creativity. So you don't have to just think, oh, I'm betting for value or I'm semi bluffing. One type of play that often gets overlooked and has a lot of upside is executing merge bets, or as called throughout the course, demi bluffs. So say in this particular spot, instead of having ace jack, we just had ace five. So we played B75 on the flop with our ace five, so 3/4 pot. It was a bit of a merge type of flop C bet. We can get some better hands to fold and some worse to call. But this hand can also be highly effective to continue being aggressive on the turn with an overbet. So what you're going to be doing with the overbet is targeting a lot of combos that have you in bad shape, like pocket tens, a bunch of the 7x. You're getting some flush draws to peel you, some 5x plus flush draw, and then ace 5 can comfortably check back quite a lot of rivers and have potential pot share versus those flush draws or that 5x plus flush draw. So you created this merge effect. If you just limited yourself to only having a 2/3 size on the turn, this particular play, this merge bet, would just completely vanish because there just wouldn't be enough upside. You wouldn't be targeting enough combos that dominate you. And your value, like your very strongest hands, they won't capture their proper EV because they won't want to reopen the action on the river. So on the turn, think about using an overbet. These are some tips to consider in the deep stack early stages of the tournament that can add some EV to your overall game. If this gave you any value, hit like. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. Modern Tournament Mastery comes out later this month, which we are really excited to share with you all. So thanks for your time, and I hope that gave you something to build off of.